Well, hello friends, I'm David Voth. It's wonderful to see everybody today, and I'm having a great day. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. Well, I want to talk to you guys today about some things. I think it's going to be very enlightening. I hope you'll listen to this video, and because there's a lot of information that I want to give you. We talk about all the lies. We talk about everything that's going on, but really we don't know the half of it. Christians need to understand what has happened to their religion, what the Bible really is. There's a lot of things that I need to tell you about this. And the same goes for New Age religions that are being told that they've got the truth as well, and yet they have misunderstood a lot of the ancient wisdom. Same thing goes for the Eastern religions. What the Eastern world doesn't know, even many of the gurus and swamis and people here in the West, what we don't know about everything that we think we know about the Eastern religion. You know, we're told a lot of things. Well, it's about sitting in a corner going, blanking out your mind and trying to get to bliss. But they don't tell you that the word bliss means blessing. They didn't do what they were doing to blank out their mind. They didn't believe that existence was an illusion. They believed that this present world and all of your trouble is an illusion. You can live in a physical body without the delusion. See, the opposite of delusion is truth. Truth is reality, and it is real. And it is a blessing. We need to have reality. We need to have our physical bodies. We need to enjoy things. We need to have these blessings. But we've been lied to. Yoga was created in the modern era, as well as many other traditions. Now we've got books that come out that teach these, supposed to be secrets that they're teaching you. And all they're saying to you is one simple truth. If you believe, you can have anything you want. But they try to simplify it, and the world goes out and buys these books, thinking that all they got to do is believe. That sounds pretty simple, right? But there is a science that goes all the way back, and we need to know that. We need to understand that that has been eradicated. We need to know why it was eradicated. Friends, if you knew some of the information that is available in this world, but out of reach right now, if you had access to that information, it would literally be dangerous. Because a man can become like a god. You do not know the power that you have within you, friends. All major religions, whatever, I don't care what religion it is, if it's in the modern times, it is false. They have lost all the information. And I'm going to show you why it's impossible for any religion today to have the truth. You cannot get the truth from any religions. All of the ancient esoteric wisdom schools were disbanded and they were closed down centuries ago. All modern organizations, even if they sound like they've got these great truths and they're using all these ancient symbols and they have these ancient books, the books they're using are fraudulent. Most of the books, for instance, I hear a lot of people saying they've read the Book of Thoth. Friends, you don't know what the Book of Thoth is. The Book of Thoth is the ancient wisdom. Thoth means thought. And the ancient wisdom was not written in a book. It's the whole system, and it's called astrology and the ancient esoteric sciences. His book was written in the stars and in every living thing that you will see in nature. And one must interpret that book. because it is also written in symbols. The only true and living book is the book that's in your heart. And the only person who can write that book and read that book is your spiritual inner man. Mystical traditions, they all had these esoteric teachings that were only for the public. And so much of anything that survived today is just something they allowed for the public. The Bible that we have has 66 books. That number means it is imperfect. It is simply what they have allowed you to have. The truth is in our Bible as it is in the ancient records in every nation. But the only records we have been allowed to read that has come down to us, the ones that were not burned and destroyed in the fires, were books that were rewritten in parabolic form in such a way that you must be initiated in order to get that truth out of that book. The deeper esoteric teachings were only for those who proved themselves worthy, and they were initiated into schools, and there were long initiations. This is true, friends, because I know that many people who are watching this video are probably Christian. And so you think, well, we're the Christian religion, and that all that other stuff you're talking about, Dave, is pagan. And it's a cult, it's demonic, it's devil worship. You don't know what you're talking about because you never have been told. You're in the dark. What you're saying is completely untrue. Your church father, Origen, who lived back in the 2nd century, one of the oldest of the church fathers, he knew about the esoteric wisdom. So why did he pretend to be a Christian? Why is it when you read, I don't mean pretend to be a Christian. We should all be Christians and follow Christ. But I mean the outer religion, this ceremonial. Why did he pretend to be this bishop in this present church who doesn't know anything but is just teaching these ceremonies and rites and never really says anything that's going to help you? If you've ever read Origen, one of the church fathers, you're not going to find a lot of esoteric wisdom in there. You're going to think, well, all these ancient church fathers were just duped. How could everybody be duped? See, I believe in Christianity, so when I look at the church fathers and they tell me this is the way we do it, we get baptized, dunk, take a wafer, then you're saved, magic wand, voila. So see, that's the truth, because Origen said so. No, you don't realize that Origen was hiding something. Why would he do that? Well, there's a good reason, friends. You see, because the Origen says that there was an esoteric doctrine that existed. And he says it was in Egypt, and there were philosophers. And that most of that ancient secret wisdom was taught and was the nature of the divine being. And the nature that is within you. It is a science that leads to great power. It was a great wisdom, and it was only disclosed, according to Church Father Origen, to people who were under this initiation process. The rest were given books that were just sort of allegories and fables that you couldn't make heads nor tails out of. All the Eastern nations, the Persians, Indians, Babylon, Egyptians, they all concealed the mysteries. So, Origen claimed that in Christianity, as in all the other religions, just like any other religion, there also were these similar teachings, these same esoteric teachings that was being veiled by these mysteries. Origen knew that the Bible that Christianity had, that they canonized and made available to the lower caste, the peasants, the people, was simply fables and mythology. In the New Testament, in the Bible, Jesus says, "To you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of God. But to everyone else, it's just a parable. So that seeing they might not see, and having ears they do not hear." And he always spoke to them with a parable. And without a parable, Jesus would not speak, he says. Jesus, remember, he told his disciples to be careful who they told these mysteries to. He said, "Do not throw your pearls before the swine." Now, in Christianity today, we read that and we think, well, he's, I don't know what he's talking about. Some powerful wisdom saying, that you got to think about real hard to grasp. Yeah, but that is a literal statement. Jesus was saying that most of the people are not ready for this wisdom. It would be dangerous for them. You cannot just willy-nilly give this amazing power to someone who is just a swine, who will rend that pearl under his own foot, bury it in the dirt and roll around in the mud. That's what the vast majority of human beings are like right now. They're not ready for this truth. And so any of you who want to know this truth, you must right now understand it's not available in the literal form. The Apostle Paul says the letter of the law, of the Torah, of the Bible, is death. But the Spirit is what gives life. Same thing, Clement of Alexandria. He lived in the 2nd century, around 150 AD to 200. He says that Mark, the book, the Gospel Mark, he says that Mark had 3 different Gospels. See, we don't have them now. We only have the one. We only have one Gospel. It's called the Gospel of Mark. You probably know that the last part of that book is missing a chapter, and then there's another chapter, a long version and a short version. Same with the book of John. Right where the book of Mark seems to have a gape, where something's been removed, the last thing it says there is something about a man in a white garment. Jesus had resurrected or something, and he was running off to get, to come to Jesus, and it sort of ends abruptly. We don't know what's going on there. Well, according to an ancient church father, Clement of Alexandria, there was another version that had the longer version that explained what really was going on there. But you see, they didn't allow that part to stay in to our canon, because it had straightforward information that only the initiates could have. People like Clement of Alexandria and Origen were initiates. They knew this information. They didn't tell anybody. So they called it the secret gospel of Mark, and it was spoken of by Clement of Alexandria. And it was only for those who were perfected. The Bible uses that word. Yeah, it does. It uses that word, but it doesn't translate it that way. That word has come down to us as a prefix. Those were the initiated, but now we don't know what an initiated person is, because they stopped initiating people into the mysteries. So Clement told us, and he told his students back in those days, that the secret gospel was to be denied under oath. Because he said, quote, "The light of the truth must be hidden from those who are mentally blind," unquote. And then there was another Gospel of Mark as well that we don't have anymore. It was a third Gospel of Mark. It was also mystical. But this one was even more powerful. It was never written down It was an oral translation or an oral tradition that only those who were initiated were allowed to have. And I see many say that Mark may have been the first of these Gospels that we have of the four Gospels, because Mark looks just like Matthew, only there's a little bit of differences here and there. And Luke just wrote what Mark had and added a few things. So Mark was probably one of the original Gospels there. And of course, when he's talking about this secret gospel of Mark, he's talking about the secret gospel that we don't have today, friends. And this is why you don't understand the Bible. Oh my goodness, friends, we have been lied to. We do have fragments of that secret gospel, but it's not included in your Bibles today. But it is an account where that little part, as I said, where Jesus was raising this person from the dead. And some say it may have been the story of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead that's in the book of John. And the man who's raised from the dead is then initiated into the mysteries by Jesus. But it doesn't tell us what happened in our Bibles. And it says he taught him the mystery of the kingdom of God. That expression's in our Bible, but we don't know what it means. Do you know what it means to know the mysteries? We don't know what that means anymore. It's been hidden from us. And that's the Gnostic truth. Because you need to know. That's what Gnostics mean. Early Christians were called Gnostics because they were knowers of the mysteries. The Apostle Paul said, "Notice how I know these mysteries." He was a knower. He was a Gnostic. But he didn't write it all down because he says, I have to give you milk. You're not ready for the meat, Paul says. So what we find out then, this story about in the literal gospel that we have in Mark, where people are raised from the dead, it really means they were initiated. It's an allegory of a rebirth through some initiation by Jesus. And of course, after he died, then his apostles would initiate individuals, and they would also raise the dead and heal the sick. And that's what it means to open the eyes of the blind. Now, the Jews of that time also had a system, just like every nation on earth. They had a system where it was a mystical, esoteric wisdom, and they called it the Kabbalah. And that means tradition. See, the tradition. Now, see, they couch everything in words that we don't understand, some other language, right? Everything's translated into English for us, except that it's in a big parable. It's a mythology. It's a fable. And the things that are literal, they just keep them, they transliterate them. They keep them in some language you don't know what it means. You don't know what Kabbalah means, right? It means the tradition. What they told people in the initiations. And so the traditional teachings, they were handed down from one person to another by the laying on of hands. But you see, the apostles had the ability to lay on hands because they're the only ones who had the mysteries. And you can't lay hands on people, friends, because you don't have these mysteries. So when you go to your church and they lay hands on you, they're just regurgitating some ancient ceremony they don't know anything about. It has to do with initiation, friends. So, one of the main Kabbalah teachings today that we still have, that's supposedly written down, is called the Zohar. And in that book it says that anyone who does understand the Hebrew Bible in its literal form is nothing but a fool. It says that every word is secret and sublime. Only the wise know. Now there was one of the Jewish rabbis of the Middle Ages. He writes, "We should never take literally what is written in the book of the creation, nor hold the same ideas about it that the people hold. Taken literally, that work contains the most absurd and far-fetched ideas of the divine. Wow. If you're a Christian and you go to the Baptist Church or the Jehovah's Witness Church or the Lutheran Church, you're believing things that are absurd, friend. And it's a far-fetched idea that you believe of your divine being. I know it's hard to swallow, friends, but you must acknowledge the truth. The Greeks, the Assyrians, the Romans, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, they all had the same thing going on in every one of their countries. They have the lesser or the esoteric mysteries that are either written in fables or in more clear and precise language. They were the esoteric mysteries. The Persians, the Syrians, the Babylonians, the Essenes, the Druids, the Mayans, all had the same thing. Even the American Indians believed in this esoteric wisdom, friends. All of the ancient peoples knew of this ancient truth. What has happened to it? We're going to tell you in this video what's happened to all of the ancient truth. I'll give you a clue. An institution came along called the Catholic Church, which burned every document and murdered every teacher and has completely wiped the ancient teachings off the face of the earth and has demonized those who study the ancient teachings and has called them devil worshippers and occult and witches and sorcerers. Do you know what the word sorcerer means, friends? It certainly does not mean someone who divines knowledge, because that means a diviner is one who seeks a divine answer. Do you not seek a divine answer? All the prophets were diviners. They were all seers originally. Then we called them prophets. But they were originally called seers and diviners. What the Bible condemns is sorcery, and that is not the same thing. That would be a medical doctor today. Original, you know how Luke was a physician, it says in the Bible? See, that means he was following in a certain esoteric school all the way back to Plato and Aristotle. They were called the physicians, and they did not use drugs, but only natural means to heal. However, there were those who did use drugs. We call them today, we call them like potions. And these were the, what we would think of as witches. But today we think that anybody who is a diviner or someone who has visions, looks into a crystal ball and has a vision or a dark glass. See, that's spoken of in 2 Corinthians or 1 Corinthians 13. We see through a dark glass, vaguely. But then she'll be face to face. You see, visions come from inner workings of your subconscious mind. You have dreams when you sleep, and you have visions when you're awake. You have visions by looking into a crystal. And there were other means to divine truth, such as throwing the lots. The apostles did that to find out who would replace Judas. They replaced him with Matthias. So it was never wrong to be a diviner. Sorcery is translated from the word pharmacist. And we still use that word, friends. And it means exactly what it means today. Someone who uses a poison or a drug and makes a potion and says to you, this is going to heal you. But in reality, it drugs you. It doesn't heal you. It's a big lie. And it has a lot to do with demons and nonsense and superstition, which is what we're forbidden to do. And the truth is that the ancient Gnostics and the ancient individuals that they blamed and said they were witches and murdered them all were not. They were simply the esoteric believers. In truth, it is the modern church, who are the sorcerers, they're the ones that advocate the doctors that we call sorcerers today. So, there's just a lot that's been turned upside down. They want you to think that somehow certain symbols are wrong, like, a pyramid shape or the Eye of Osiris. It's, that's the occult. No, those are ancient mysteries, ancient symbols that teach truths. Just like our cross. It didn't start with Jesus. This is an ancient symbol that goes all the way back. And Jesus taught the same mysteries. So you had to be admitted into the schools, the mystery schools, the Essenes and the Nazarenes. Jesus was the Nazarene. He was the leader of a sect. The book of Acts says the Nazarenes was a sect, a cult. It was not the Judaism. They didn't believe in Judaism. They were vegetarians, so they couldn't even go to the temple and make sacrifices because they didn't eat meat and didn't believe in killing animals, or they didn't believe in killing at all. The Greeks had these mysteries as well, and they would perform these mysteries in the spring near Athens. They also had the greater mysteries. They had the lesser and the greater, just like Christianity originally had both. But because of the suppression of the truth, we no longer have the greater mysteries. And the lesser mysteries were given to the initiates, and they were called the Mystae. The greater mysteries were called the Epoptai, and those were the ones who were the seers, the clear seers, they called them. And they had attained communion with their higher self. But the regular people were never given these initiations, and they didn't have the ability to communicate with the higher realms. Hindus, Buddhists also had the same traditions. They had secret schools. According to Buddha, things that he revealed to his students, though they were vast and amazing and stunned his listeners, he said they were only a very, very small portion of the mysteries that he knew, but did not reveal to the public. He said he reserved the deeper teachings for his disciples, just like Jesus did. And he taught them in secret. There were a lot of reasons, friends, why these mysteries were concealed. And you're going to hear from a lot of people reasons like, they're too important, and we just read where Jesus said, don't throw your pearl before swine. However, it doesn't mean that anyone would ever be barred from the mysteries. Anyone could learn the mysteries. Anybody could sign up and go into the school and learn the mysteries. But you couldn't be given the mysteries in a moment. You had to learn. That's why the Apostle Paul said the milk, not meat. And those who were interested, if they showed interest and were willing, they were taught the mysteries. No one was denied. But remember, there were times when anyone who was found out telling these mysteries were put to death. During the Dark Ages, millions of people in the Inquisitions, and there were many Inquisitions, they were all murdered and put to death, and all the books were burned. The Brahmins also had the same situation. One of the reasons that they did not teach people publicly these things is that the person that was learning the information, they called them neophytes. Okay, and so in order to illuminate the neophyte, or to enlighten that person and make them understand these great mysteries, they had to be able to understand them. So many of the mysteries are just not communicable. You could not communicate these truths just by talking to them initially for a few minutes. They had to look at symbols and meditate on these ancient truths. They had to learn, like for instance, if you're going to learn physics and somebody says, hey, I want to know physics, right? I want to know chemistry and astronomy and all these other amazing, algebra and geometry and all these things. I want to know. Why won't you tell me? Come on, tell me. Well, are you willing to study? Are you willing to learn? It may take some time. You may have to expand your mind a little bit. But no one would be denied. The illumination comes from within, and so therefore the symbols are used in a way to illuminate the adept. So knowledge can only be communicated gradually. You can't just teach people immediately these great truths. So that's one of the reasons why they had to have initiations. Another reason was because they couldn't speak openly of some of these things. They would be put to death. If somebody were to tell the truth to someone who is not initiated into the truth and didn't understand, they would just seem like total gibberish, nonsense, garbage. You would laugh at them. Point in fact, an example, some of my videos that I'm putting out there, if you read in the comments below, you'll see how people laugh and mock them because they do not understand. They're like the swine that tramples the pearl underfoot. So the complete essence of truth, friends, cannot be transmitted in words with my mouth to your ear. Lots of you say, well, I've been listening to your videos for a long time, Dave, and I still don't know what to do. I know I've tried to do miracles. I can't do it. I'm only explaining to you how you can do it. To actually perform miracles, you must become initiated into the truth and comprehend them. To comprehend them is your task. I can't describe to you the feeling of joy. I can only tell you that it exists. If an angel of God came down and sat you down, and because I know a lot of you probably think, why doesn't God just tell me the truth? Why don't he just send an angel to my door? Well, he probably has many times. There are angels always with you, friends. But you are not ready. I testify to you that when I was quite young, an angel came to me, and as he came and approached, I immediately was paralyzed and could not look at him face to face. Because he exuded knowledge and grace, and I could not receive it at that time. So that's why angels don't just appear before people on a daily basis. Most of you are not ready for an angel. Remember in the Bible how it says when the angel arrived to see Daniel, it says he fell down sick many days. And remember Jeremiah did the same thing in John. They fell sick. They fainted. And the angel raised them up. Because when you're in the presence of a being that has truth and light, sometimes it's almost overwhelming. And we need to be ready for that. So it takes time. The only way that you can find the truth is by going into the most holy, into the inner chambers where these documents are preserved. And friends, the book of Thoth, the word is in your heart. Remember how we've gone through some of these videos and we talked about how the word's got to be in your heart, the transplanting that's got to be done, that the apostles talked about, the brother of the Lord James spoke of, the transplanting of the word, and the word is what enlightens you. Thoth means thought, and he's the one that wrote all of the ancient sciences, and he writes it on your heart. No man can teach you, but the Holy Spirit shall teach you all things. And he will bring back to your mind the things that I have told you. And so, you must go into the sanctuary of your own heart, and there you will find the ancient writings that have never left this earth, and that are always with you. For I shall be with you unto the end of the age. It is in your innermost being in the depths of your divine intuition that all truth resides. Some of the teachings, as I said, are dangerous in your hands if you were to receive them at this moment. You do not have the capacity at this moment to do these divine miracles, because let's say I gave you the power that whatsoever you say with your mouth will happen instantaneously. Now that's a fact, whether you believe it now or exercise that authority at this time or not. I will tell you that it is true, that you may speak a word, and whatsoever you say, it will be done. However, you must believe, and that is a process that you do not understand. If you didn't understand it, but you were still able to do this, but you didn't have understanding, you would be creating stuff in this world that has no business being in this world. It's dangerous. So it can be misused, and this is another reason why we don't just tell everybody all of the secrets immediately, even if we could. There are many inner teachings that, if you understood, it would literally make you drop on your knees to the ground and start crying and convulsing in tears of joy. You would literally heal your entire body, and anyone who came into contact with you would be instantaneously healed just from the knowledge that exists in truth. Man has a sevenfold nature. There are higher planes that have tremendous power that you could ascend right now if you knew how to do so. This is why Jesus opened the eyes of the blind. This is why he stuck his fingers in the deaf man's ears and then pulled his fingers out and the man could hear. Because it represents that Christ within you will heal you and give you hearing, and true sight, which is spiritual truth. And you will be a Gnostic and knower. In the first 200-300 years of our Christian era, there was a place called Alexandria. It's in Egypt, northern Egypt, and it's right along most of you know where it is, along the Mediterranean. That was a particular temple that had all of these books. It was a great library. It was a place where Greeks, Romans, Jews, Egyptians, whoever you were, whatever nation you were in, was a center of trade. Where there was lots of people from different nations. But whoever you were, you could go there and you could learn. Whether in the east or from the west or the north or the south, it was a library. And it was promoted to all these different cultures at the time because it was a spiritual tradition. They wanted people to learn. And it was the greatest center of learning in the world at the time. It was a center of pagan mysticism, and it was where Gnosticism began. There was a man called Ammonius Saccas. He was the founder of Neoplatonism. He's the one who started this philosophy, bringing together all of these teachings, and he called it Theosophic School. He started it in Alexandria in the 3rd century. Now, we just talked about Origen. He was one of his pupils. Yeah, a church father, studying mysticism, ancient esoteric wisdom. A founder of Christianity who knew the truth and was schooled and initiated into these ancient teachings. Also, along with Origen, there was Plotinus. Then there was a bunch of others later on called Porphyry, Hypatia, Proclus. These were all famous people that you've probably heard of. And they all knew these ancient teachings. But you wouldn't know about it, would you? Because they didn't tell us what they knew, and they didn't write it down for the public. There were a lot of other famous names that were associated with this place in Alexandria, in this great library. One of them is Philo, who wrote history. Now, do you think then if Origen knew all this ancient wisdom but didn't tell the church. He was hiding the truth and just teaching the parables, teaching the myth. Then what do you suppose the historians did to our history books? See, I did a video yesterday telling you that Jerusalem was in Egypt. In your Bible, the book of Revelation chapter 11, it says that Jesus was crucified in Egypt. And we have little symbols, phrases in the Bible that hide certain mysteries. It says Jesus was killed on a mountain called Golgotha. That's the place of the skull. That's the place in Egypt, in that area called Goshen today, which represents the brain, and the river Nile is the spine. And so the historians of that time were all schooled in this philosophy that goes back to the Egyptian priesthood, because that was a place, that Alexandrian library held all of the great mysteries, and that priesthood that watched over those books and that brought them there from Heliopolis 500 years before were all priests of the great mystery schools. And those who went there to learn and was initiated into these truths are the very people that wrote our history. And I'm telling you, friends, the history that they wrote is couched in symbols. It is accurate. Yes, it is accurate. Jesus died in Jerusalem, but Jerusalem was in Egypt. They have hidden and moved things around and altered it in an allegory for you. It is still true, and for those who have eyes to see, you will find the truth, friends. But for those who will continue to believe that Oz is real and terrible and awesome, and he is a god, but really when you pull back the curtain, you find out there's something else going on. So Philo Judaeus, who wrote all of this information that we have about our past, was simply writing allegory. He synthesized the Old Testament with Greek and Pythagorean philosophy. And Jesus Christ, though he really and truly existed as well as the apostles, it was all written down in symbols to teach you greater truths. Clement of Alexandria, ever heard of him? He's another one of these Gnostics, initiated into the mystery schools, who created and began our Christian religion today. Alexandria was repeatedly destroyed and burned. They completely destroyed it in about 296. Julius Caesar is said to have burned the library back in 47 BC. So it had happened several times because they wanted that knowledge gone. They didn't want people to know the truth. In 272, the Alexandrian library was devastated by a civil war when the Roman Emperor Aurelian came in and ravaged the city. So all of the alchemical and hermetic works of the Egyptians then were burned, and then the Emperor Diocletian, he suppressed the revolt in Alexandria in 296 and burned it down again. Emperor Theodosius II banished paganism from the Roman Empire in Thrace, Macedonia, Crete, Syria, Egypt, the entire region. He banned it. And then the Christian Patriarch of Alexandria went further and got rid of anything left that resembled any of the pagan shrines, pagan friends, not meaning devil worship, meaning nations. The other nations, that's what the word pagan means. See, they lied to you. They destroyed all of the ancient wisdom and their histories and their teachings and the ancient esoteric wisdom written in the stars called astrology. The calendar, the ancient wisdom, friends. Our language, chemistry, astronomy, all of the ancient knowledge, a system, a knowledge, a philosophical system that's been completely eradicated from the earth. And in 391, there was a Christian mob that went in and they just razed it to the ground so that there absolutely was nothing left. All of the classical literature, all of the sciences, all of the teachings, it's gone. And then they used the stones that they because they just razed it to the ground, took all the stones and hauled them off, and then they went and built Christian churches to deceive us and to hide these truths. The man who did that, Theophilus, he was later on honored as a saint by the Catholic Church. Sure, they honored people that destroy the truth and burn it down and raze it to the ground. And we're left with nothing. See, this ancient philosophy, it was literally growing and flourishing, and much of the world had access to these ancient truths. They understood these things we today call mysteries a lot better than we do today. It wasn't meant that you should be in the dark. Not like this. Sure, you need to be initiated. Sure, you need to learn. But right now, you don't even have the ability to do that because you were told that it's evil. And so, in about 415, there was another Christian mob. And they were all upset because of this patriarch of Alexandria called Cyril. He murdered Hypatia. And he was one of these philosophers, a mathematician. He was an astronomer. He understood the ancient wisdom. He was murdered by a Christian mob. Just like Theophilus. That was his uncle, actually. And so they made this Cyril, they made him a saint as well. And the death and the murder of Hypatia has been called the death of the pagan world and the beginning of the Dark Ages. It's literally the mark of the age of darkness. 415 Christ's era. And from that point, we lost the mysteries to such an extent that anyone who thought they had the mysteries didn't know what the mysteries were, and they were just teaching lies. And they were actually encouraged to believe in lies. And they began to suppress anything that was truthful and good and wholesome. And then they allowed it to degenerate and become some kind of ritualistic ceremonial superstition. They began to have orgies and got very degraded and ignorant. They were controlled and lied to and deceived. And so, around the year 529, we've got the Emperor Justinian, who basically closes down the last philosophical school in Athens, which was the academy that was founded by Plato. It was over. And you don't, to this day, have an idea. You don't even know who this Plato was. Plato received his ancient, or his esoteric wisdom, not from a school like you would think. You know, we're all think, oh, it's a philosophy is a school that they were just philosopher. We don't. What's that, right? He got his information and his wisdom from Pythagoras, and Pythagoras got it from Solon, who was a high priest of the ancient Egyptian mysteries. And these mystery schools, in one form or another, were all over the world at one time. But it was finally closed down in 529 by Justinian, the Emperor of Rome. Finally, they destroyed the Alexandrian library once again, and this was the final destruction, 642. And this is when the Arabs came in and conquered it. Now, some say that that's kind of exaggerated. Maybe the Christians were blaming the Arabs for it, when actually they were the ones who were doing it. But nevertheless, the point is that they did not want these ancient truths understood. So there are secret records in Christianity that we no longer have, and ancient traditions that we are no longer able to read or hear about because the people who knew them were murdered. But this is the same thing that was going on in the East, friends. In 1945, we dug up some of the ancient Gnostic writings, and we have a little bit more understanding about these things. You see, interestingly enough, by divine providence, many of these ancient books that were once burned are starting to turn up. Now, why do you suppose those books were buried in the ground in that area there at Nag Hammadi? Because these priests who wrote them in the parchment were trying to preserve these ancient truths, and they knew that the Catholics were coming to burn them out and to destroy it. So They wrote some of them down in symbolic form so that we could still have them. Nevertheless, they weren't pure and straightforward, and they knew that. But they wrote them in such a way that they could be preserved, because the Catholics, being ignorant, did not know what these myths and these symbols were. The ones that were plain and pure and precious, they were burned. So they took some of them, which is the more accurate Gospels, the Nag Hammadi Gospels, the Gospel of Truth, the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. And when you read those Gospels, you realize that they're a little different than the ones we have, because you see, the ones we have were purposely written down by these adepts, these prefects. Those who were initiated knew the knowledge. They wrote them down in symbols because that's the only way they could be preserved. And you could read them today. The ones that were written down more accurately and more plainly, if they weren't burned, they were taken and buried in certain caves. And we've dug some of them up, and you'll see that they are more plain. The ones that we have recently dug up, they're actually more accurate because they're more plain. They're not couched in so many symbols, not that sort of allegory type thing. They're still written in symbols. Remember, there are various layers of this. And then there's another layer which is just spoken to the initiate. Now, around the end of the 5th century, there's another guy named Chrysostom. He was an archbishop. By the 5th century, they had destroyed all of this information so well and rid the earth of it so completely that Archbishop Chrysostom, he said in his arrogant boast, "Every trace of the old philosophy and literature of the ancient world has vanished from the face of the earth." Ha 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 ha. There was a treatise, a Gnostic treatise, it was discovered in the 18th century, and that included the Pistos Sophia. What's really interesting is that over the last 100 years, 200 years actually, these amazing documents that are very important religious documents all over the world have somehow just miraculously turned up. And many of them are very unexpected. We never dreamed that we'd receive these information. I mean, the Sumerian tablets, there's thousands of them. But just having them doesn't do us any good. Number one, they've got to be translated. That's taken us a long time. And then when we translate them, people laugh at them. And they say, oh, the translators were wrong. And no, they don't have any problem with the Bible in the King James Version, but they don't like the translation of the Sumerian tablets by those who had no reason to lie to you, such as the Catholic Church would have had. Our King James Bible, 1611 version, was just a version of the Bible. It was not a translation of the original manuscript, but it was simply a version of the Latin Vulgate, which was written and given to us by the Catholic Church. Christians, and those who were sincere Christians, who knew anything about the ancient truths, they were actually forced themselves to conceal the truth. Brainwashed into believing that all of this ancient information was simply pagan and devil worship and evil. And so very well-meaning individuals throughout the Dark Ages burned a lot of stuff. And very good people brought their own mothers and their own children forward to be executed in the Inquisition, believing they were doing God's will. Oh, the horrors of the lies of Satan, friends. And we're still believing these lies. People, wake up. We must wake up. Even the Kabbalah is not the original Kabbalah. If you read anything about the Kabbalah today, you're not going to get all of the ancient esoteric wisdom. The Vatican has an ancient manuscript of this Kabbalah, and there is one copy of it, which is in Europe, and it was supposed to have been the real ancient Kabbalah that was in the hands of a man named Saint Germain. Some of you may know who he is. He was one of these esoteric believers in the area we call the Dark Ages. And they said it contained a lot more detail, and the teachings were a lot more concise. And they said it contained a lot of the teachings of the ancient esoteric wisdom that we don't have, and it's not in any of the works of Kabbalah that we have today. We have a Kabbalah today that was written by a man named Shimon ben Yochai, and he said the true Kabbalah of the initiates is lost, and the original is to be found in a book called the Chaldean Book of Numbers, and that exists in a Latin translation in the libraries. So we know that some of these works that we have today were forgeries, or they're still true, written in allegory, but not the deeper truths. Because there was a man named Moses de Leon in the 13th century who wrote another version of this kind of Kabbalah. And he admits that he wrote this under the direct inspiration of the Syrian or this Chaldean tradition, as it was. Moses de Leon in the 13th century created a pseudograph, and he says he wrote this under direct inspiration of the Syrian and Chaldean Christians who had the ancient traditions preserved in the Midrashim, which were the remaining fragments of the true Zohar. So you see, the Zohar we have today is not the true one. And so the ancient wisdom was eradicated almost completely, even in what we consider the esoteric wisdom today. And so if you think that modern New Age religions and individuals like Madame Blavatsky could have, you must be sadly mistaken. They didn't have access to it. So the Kabbalah that we have today is just this remnant of the ancient wisdom, the ancient secret doctrine of the Chaldeans. That's because the Jews were taken into captivity to Babylon. And so the original Kabbalah then was called the Chaldean Book of Numbers. They say that it is now, to this day, it is still in the possession of some Sufis in Persia. It's supposedly translated into Arabic, and it's preserved by the Sufi initiates. But we don't know because we don't have it. Because you see, they're preserving these ancient wisdom. They say that we're not ready for this. They're not going to just put it out there, because then the Catholics would get a hold of it and burn it, or ban it, or laugh at it, or mock it. The same thing is true, friends, of Jainism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism. There were certain individuals from the Orient that have told us they found that there were huge numbers of these ancient manuscripts, the Eastern wisdom from Jainism and Taoism and Hinduism. There were printed manuscripts and works, and they used to exist, and they said they had completely disappeared without a trace. Nobody could find them, but it's testified that they existed. And it says most of them contained keys and ancient truths that we don't have. And those truths would be entirely incomprehensible to people today, because we have no idea. We've never heard of such things. This is why nobody today can perform miracles, because we've never read this ancient wisdom, and we're not privy to this ancient wisdom. And so therefore these modern religions, such as yogi, is completely in the dark. They don't really know what they're talking about. Today, the Jain religion has a book called the Angas, and we have that book, but they were originally just an auxiliary account. They were just an appendage to their original scriptures, the 14 Purvas. And those Purvas are completely lost to us today. We don't have them. So we don't have the original scriptures of the Jains. The same thing goes with Hinduism, friends. There was a Swami named Dayanand Sarasvati, and he said that they only had bits and pieces of rejected copies of some of the passages from the sacred books. The oldest scriptures of India are called the Vedas. And the ancient initiates said that you could not comprehend them because they were all written in allegory. You could not comprehend them unless you read the commentaries with them. You read the allegory, but if you were initiated into the religion, they gave you the commentaries. However, the commentaries are completely lost. They only have a few incomplete manuscripts of the earlier commentaries, and the oldest ones that we have today are from the 7th century. These are late commentaries, and the oldest ones have been completely destroyed and have disappeared. It is said that in order to understand the ancient Brahmin literature, you've got to have a key. They call it a key, and that key resides in the ancient commentaries and these ancient primitive hymns that they had written that we no longer read, but the people are just ignorantly reading these allegories without the key. The same is true for Christianity as it is for the ancient Eastern teachings. Many of the Upanishads, little treaties that it is said that back in the 18th century, there were about 150 of these commentaries and treatises on the Upanishads. Well, they got rid of most of them, and today we only have 20 of those left. And not all of those are genuine. We no longer have any genuine copies of the key or the commentaries or the understanding of the allegory. It was purposely written in allegory, just as our Bible was written in an allegory. According to some, a lot of these ancient manuscripts are still in the world, but they're hidden in caves, hidden away in certain monasteries and caves up in the Himalayas, in the jungles, or certain mountains in southern India or whatever. If you do any research into Buddhism, you'll find that Buddha came to enlighten mankind. He was upset that the ancient wisdom had been lost and that they were suppressing all of the ancient teachings and documents. And he was teaching the people these ancient truths, and this is why they didn't like Buddha. Because he was teaching people the plain truth, just as Jesus was doing. But he would do it privately, the deeper truths. Buddha did the same thing. Well, they didn't like Buddha and they didn't like Christ, and of course they killed Jesus Christ. The Buddhist literature is not available in its complete form, friends. All the ancient works that we have today, whether they be from Hinduism or Buddhism, were only preserved in traditions that have now been eradicated practically from the earth. And they are considered lost. So, really the world had lost most of this information until around the time of Madame Blavatsky. And she did a very interesting work. She spent a lot of time studying, researching, and writing all of this information down. However, she did not have access to all of the information. And she was removed from the original facts and did not have the tradition of the elders. We cannot completely trust everything that some woman decided was the truth a few years back. But we must wait on our Father in heaven, who is revealing these truths to us today. Since Madame Blavatsky, we have been privileged to dig up many ancient books, manuscripts, cuneiform tablets, and scrolls that we are interpreting today, and this is putting it all together for us, friends. And the time of enlightenment is here, but you're not going to be on the train to enlightenment if you don't hear the bell. Friends, do not miss out. You must start thinking for yourself and realizing that what we have been told is a big, fat lie. And so, friends, I'm going to go ahead and end this here. But I want you to understand how important all of this is. If you want to know the truth, you're going to have to start understanding the symbolism and knowing the allegory is all about astrology. This is the missing key. So I'm going to go ahead and go. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow. Have a good one.